They charged me $1,200 for swimming. Not trespassing, not vandalism, just swimming. In water I legally own. In the same lake I've called mine for over a decade. That's when I knew something had gone sideways in Pine Ridge. You don't wake up expecting a war over morning laps, but there I was, standing in my kitchen with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand and a certified letter in the other, heavy envelope, the kind that screams bad news before you even break the seal. I remember thinking, this better be a joke, as I slid the papers out. It wasn't. What I found inside was a full 3-page violation notice from the Pine Ridge Lakeside Association, citing unauthorized use of shared aquatic property and demanding a payment of $1,200 within 30 days or risk legal escalation. I actually laughed, out loud. My dog Baxter gave me a side-eye like he was embarrassed for me. I mean, swimming? In my own lake? What were they going to charge me with next, breathing HOA certified air? I couldn't let it go. Not just because of the money, though that part stung, but because of what it meant. It meant someone somewhere thought they could rewrite reality because they got a little power and a clipboard. And in this case, that someone was Brenda Halcroft. I'll get to her. But first, you need to understand the lake. My lake. When I bought my place 17 years ago, Crystal Mirror Lake was more than a selling pointee was the reason. My property line slices right through the water, and it's spelled out plain as daylight in my deed. It wasn't vague or disputed. It was ink on paper law. Back then, the community was smaller, friendlier. We were a neighborhood, not a regime. Kids played until sundown. People barbecued without permits or forms in triplicate. The lake was a shared joy, a mutual luxury. Some folks had docks, others had kayaks. I had a ritual every morning at sunrise. I'd wade in, swim a few laps, then sit on my little deck with a towel around my shoulders and coffee in hand. Pure, uninterrupted peace. I wasn't the only one who thought so. My old neighbors used to wave from their porches or even join me sometimes. There was old Phil Rogers, the previous HOA president. Now there was a man who understood the difference between rules and rulebooks. He used to say, the point of an association is to associate, not alienate. He even left me a signed note in my welcome folder confirming my right to lake access and use. Phil never needed a legal team or threats. A handshake and a cold beer were usually enough to settle disputes, and for the better part of 15 years, everything ran smoothly. Sure, there were occasional disagreements, someone parking too close to a hydrant, another letting their shrubs run wild, but nothing a friendly chat couldn't fix. All of that changed the day Brenda Halcroft moved in. It started with the dog park. She didn't like that it was too informal. Next came the Halloween decorations, which she claimed were spiritually intrusive. By the time she got herself voted in as HOA president, thanks to a mix of apathy and folks not realizing what they were signing up for, she was wielding that authority like it was her personal kingdom. You could spot her from a block away. Perfectly ironed slacks, hair sprayed into a helmet, lips pursed in permanent disapproval, and of course, the ever-present clipboard. It didn't matter what day of the week it was, if Brenda was walking the neighborhood. Someone was about to get fined. At first, people tried to humor her. She fined Jim Carlisle for having a bird feeder because seeds attract vermin. Then she cited the Kowalskis for using the wrong shade of beige on their porch swing. And everyone laughed a little, rolled their eyes, and figured it'd pass. But it didn't. The list of rules kept growing. And not the kind voted on in meetings, the kind Brenda wrote up herself and enforced with the zeal of a mall cop in a ghost town. And then came my turn. I should have seen it coming, really. The lake had become her latest obsession. She claimed swimmers caused erosion, that they scared off wildlife, that the reflection of bodies in the water could disturb the natural aesthetic. One Saturday morning, I was out for my usual swim. Water was glassy, sun just peeking over the horizon. Not another soul in sight except Brenda, standing at the edge of my lawn, heels sinking into damp grass, her silhouette outlined in righteous fury. She held that clipboard like a weapon, and before I could even towel off, she was shouting across the water about unauthorized water activity and pending violations. I thought it was a bad joke, maybe even performance art. I waved her off and went inside thinking it would blow over. It didn't. 3 days later, that envelope arrived. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about the lake. It wasn't about bylaws or safety or any of the things she claimed. It was about control, pure and simple. Brenda didn't care about the rules unless she was the one writing them, and if I let her get away with this, she'd rewrite the whole damn map. So I decided something in that moment, standing barefoot in my kitchen with legalese fluttering in my hand. I wasn't just going to fight the fine, I was going to fight the system that let it happen. Because if they could fine me for swimming, then no one in Pine Ridge was safe from the next clipboard crusade. Brenda Halcroft didn't just arrive, descended. She came with the kind of energy usually reserved for hostile takeovers and emergency board meetings. Within days of moving into her pristine lakefront colonial, she had printed new signs for the community bulletin board and slipped thick packets of updated expectations into every mailbox, like she was passing out the 10 Commandments. Most folks didn't even know she was running for HOA president until they got a notice congratulating her on her uncontested win. Her rise was quiet but calculated, and it hit the neighborhood like a slow-building storm. By the time anyone realized what was happening, Brenda already had her claws sunk deep into the workings of Pine Ridge. Her clipboard wasn't just a prop, it was a symbol. It had tabs and color-coded pages and those little sticky notes that looked like neon flags. She wielded it like a badge, always clutched to her chest or tapped rhythmically against her thigh like a metronome of menace. The first real sign of trouble was when she fined George Mathers for leaving his trash bin out overnight on recycling day. Not trash day, recycling. 2 different trucks, 2 different schedules. Didn't matter. George got hit with a 75 warning and a pamphlet on neighborhood presentation. People grumbled, sure, but no one wanted to be the next target. The fines rolled in like waves. Improper mulch types, holiday lights staying up past January 10th, basketball hoops not anchored according to code, flags being too large for acceptable pole dimensions. And then, in a move that felt like parody, she literally measured someone's grass with a tape measure on a Thursday afternoon, in broad daylight. No shame, no hesitation, just down on one knee counting blades like a forensic analyst at a crime scene. It wasn't long before neighbors stopped chatting over fences. People who used to wave began averting their eyes, closing garage doors a little faster, keeping porch lights off even on mild summer nights. Fear hung in the air, not heavy but sharp, subtle, like the sting of lemon juice in a paper cut. Brenda didn't need to scream to be heard. She had that kind of cold authority that made people comply just to avoid interaction. And through it all, she kept circling the lake, eyeing it like it was a kingdom she hadn't conquered yet. Then she turned her gaze on me. The Lake was her new frontier. At first, it was small comments. Jack, I noticed some of the neighbors have concerns about safety. Or, have you ever considered logging your swimming hours with the board for transparency? I laughed those off. Figured it was Brenda being Brenda. But she escalated fast. She began citing supposed bylaws regulations about water use that didn't even exist. She claimed swimming created turbulence that could damage the shoreline. She quoted nonsense about liability exposure and aquatic zoning. One morning, she actually shouted across the water while I was mid-stroke, "This will be documented." That's when I knew she wasn't going to let this go. When the fine arrived, I tried to play it straight. I wrote her a formal response, attached the deed showing my property lines, highlighted the sections that clearly stated my lake rights. I even included a scanned copy of the old HOA president's letter, the one Phil Rogers had written years ago when I asked about lake use. A simple one-pager saying, Jack Harper owns this portion of Crystal Mirror Lake and may use it as he sees fit. But Brenda didn't budge. She sent another letter this time twice as long, dismissing my documentation and saying, the current board interprets the use of communal resources differently than previous leadership, which sounded less like a legal position and more like, I don't like what you're doing, so I'm making up reasons. That's when I realized, playing defense wasn't going to cut it. I was treating this like a misunderstanding, but Brenda was fighting a campaign. She had no interest in facts-only dominance. If I didn't fight this smart, I'd lose. Not just the lake, but my freedom to enjoy the home I'd built. So I changed tactics. I stopped replying to her letters, stopped arguing, and started researching. I dug through 30 years of HOA history, not just the digital records, the real stuff. Old newsletters, scanned meeting minutes, faded faxes tucked into cardboard boxes at town hall. I became obsessed. Every night after work, I combed through files with a highlighter and a notepad. I was looking for a crack in the armor, a thread to pull. Most of it was boring, dense, full of procedural jargon and budget disputes over lamppost replacements and winter salt allocations. But then, just when I was ready to give up, I found it. A scanned agreement dated June 12, 2001. The HOA had requested access to private lakeside parcels for community events and emergency maintenance, including mine, a 2-page lease agreement. 1 a year, purely symbolic. It allowed them to set up tents and use trucks along a narrow section of the shoreline for 10 years. The lease had been renewed twice since, once in 2011 and again in 2016. But the last renewal expired in August of the previous year, and no one had signed a new one. No vote, no meeting minutes, no legal continuity, which meant the HOA had no legal right to step foot on my land anymore, and they had been, for months. For cleanup days, for landscaping, for community yoga sessions with soy candles and portable speakers. All of it trespassing. My hands shook as I printed the document. I sent a copy to Marla, my lawyer and longtime friend. She called me 5 minutes later, laughing so hard she had to pause and catch her breath. "Jack," she said, "you want to have a little fun?" And that's when everything changed. I wasn't just going to clear my name, I was going to flip the script. Because Brenda Halcroft had overplayed her hand, and now I had the ace. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for a Wednesday evening at the Pine Ridge Community Hall, a beige stucco building that used to host art classes and potlucks before Brenda turned it into her personal courthouse. That night, it was packed. Word had gotten out not just about the fines, but about the tension that had been simmering for months. People who hadn't shown up for meetings in years suddenly found the time. There was a different kind of energy in the room, crackling and uncertain, like the pause before a summer thunderstorm. I walked in with my leather folder tucked under one arm, copies neatly printed and tabbed. No dramatic entrance, no posturing, just a quiet confidence that came from knowing I finally had the truth, and this time, truth had teeth. They went through the usual song and dance first. Brenda up front, flanked by her 2 loyalists, Dean Sutherland, a retired dentist with a chronic frown, and Lynn Carter, who nodded at everything Brenda said like a bobblehead on a dashboard. Brenda launched into her monthly review of community compliance, rattling off violations like she was announcing the Oscar nominees, shrubs too high on Maple Drive, decorative flags past holiday deadlines. She even mentioned someone leaving out a garden gnome without board approval, which drew an audible groan from the back of the room. But she pressed on, undeterred. When it came time for public comments, I stood up and walked to the front, folder in hand. "Brenda," I began, "the HOA has been accessing my property, specifically the lakeside portion, for the past 6 months without a valid lease." I let the sentence hang there just long enough to let it sink in. The agreement that permitted such access expired last August. It was never renewed. That means the HOA's activities on my land since then have been unlawful. Technically, trespassing. There was a shift in the room, a low murmur, a few gasps. Brenda's expression tightened, but I could see the worry creep in beneath her practiced calm. "I'm not here to drag anyone through the mud," I continued, handing out copies of the lease agreement, the expiration clause highlighted in yellow. "I'm willing to negotiate a new lease. Terms are simple. 6-0 per year, non-negotiable." Dead silence. You could have heard the air conditioner rattle. Brenda's mouth opened and closed twice before any sound came out. "This is extortion," she finally snapped, voice shrill and cracking at the edges. "You're holding the community hostage for personal gain." "No," I said calmly. "I'm offering a fair lease for land you no longer have the right to use. It's business. 3 local realtors I consulted all confirmed it's a standard rate for shoreline access. If you'd like to contest it, feel free to bring your lawyer." I nodded toward Marla in the second row, who gave a little wave. Brenda's face turned a dangerous shade of crimson. Dean Sutherland looked like he might actually faint. Lynn, for once, didn't nod. Then the room exploded, not in chaos, but in realization. People began whispering, flipping through the papers I'd handed out. Phones came out. Someone pulled up the HOA website to check the meeting minutes. No record of a renewal vote. Not a single one. I sat back down as the board stumbled through their remaining agenda, their authority shrinking by the second. Brenda tried to regain control, but she was done. That night, the myth cracked. The woman behind the clipboard wasn't invincible. She was just loud. Over the next few days, the neighborhood transformed. The Pine Ridge Neighbors Facebook group, which had once been nothing more than lost dog posts and garage sale ads, lit up with activity. Screenshots of my lease discovery. People sharing their own stories of unjust fines and ignored emails. Brenda loyalists tried to do damage control, but it was like throwing water on a grease fire. One by one, the silent majority found their voices. And then, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Evelyn Grayson, a quiet widow who had lived on Lot 22 since the community's founding, asked to speak at the emergency HOA meeting the following week. No one had ever heard Evelyn speak publicly. She was known for her lemon tarts and her handwritten holiday cards, not fiery speeches. But when she stood up that night back straight, hair neatly pinned, eyes bright, everyone listened. She spoke with grace and precision, not venom. This community was built on friendship, she said, on neighbors helping neighbors, on shared spaces and mutual respect. We used to share lemonade on porches, not cease and desist letters. And somewhere along the way, we gave power to someone who doesn't understand the difference between order and oppression. She turned her gaze directly on Brenda. A lake isn't dangerous, but injustice is. No one said a word when she finished. They didn't need to. The vote happened right after. Unanimous. Lease approved. Brenda's leadership revoked. 89% of the community voted her out. The highest margin in Pine Ridge history. It wasn't even close. The letter came the next day. A formal apology from the new interim board. My fine was rescinded, plus interest. They wanted to renegotiate the lease. $500 a year. Handshake agreement. Mutual respect. I signed it that afternoon. No lawyers, no drama. Just people remembering how to be neighbors again. A week later, I hammered in a new wooden sign at the base of my dock. It read, "Private lake, swim freely," and just underneath, in smaller letters, 2. HOA, clipboards not welcome. Last I heard, Brenda took a job as a compliance consultant in Clearfield, 2 counties over. Some poor neighborhood over there probably just got its first set of lawn flag regulations and grass height restrictions. But that's not my fight anymore. These days I still swim every morning. Just me, the sunrise and the ripple of water around me. The lake is calm again. The neighborhood too. Funny how peace comes rushing back when you drain out the nonsense. Was I wrong to fight? Maybe to some. But I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was pushing back against a system that forgot why it existed in the first place. Pine Ridge didn't need more rules. It needed reminders. And if I had to dive headfirst into conflict to get there, well, let's just say the water's fine.